All right. Thank you for being here today, Areva. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Well,
Uh,
thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
yeah, I'm so excited. And I'm excited to announce to everyone that you are about to be the cover model on our June issue. Whoop, whoop. and
I'm so excited, super excited about that.
I am too. And there's going to be a lot more to your interview in the June magazine. So I hope people will go below and go and pre order a copy. I haven't even told you that they can already go to bellavitamagazine.com and pre order either a digital or printed copy of your magazine. And we're going to be donating 10% of all of those sales to Special Needs Network. So that's a
Oh,
surprise
how
for you.
amazing. Thank you. I can't wait to get the link so I can send it out to my people and start promoting it.
Oh,
That
I'm
is,
excited
thank you so
too.
much.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. It's my pleasure. I love what you're doing. And we're going to get into all the amazing work you're doing with Special Needs Network so that people know what an amazing organization you have. But I want to really get people to get to know you since they might not have seen you yet on CNN or heard you on the radio. Um, you've had such an incredible career as a civil rights attorney, and you're such a strong advocate. And I'd love to learn more about you and really what inspired you to want to become an attorney, especially a civil rights attorney.
Yeah, a little about me. I grew up in North St. Louis and I was just home a couple of weeks ago celebrating the inaugural alumni event for my high school. I went to an all girls Catholic high school.
Oh,
High
wow.
school is 113 years old. And it's a small group of women who have graduated from this school over 100 years, only 7,000 of us. And last year, the Archdiocese announced that it was closing the school. And
Mhm.
the women that are graduates rallied together to stop the closure of the school. They created their own nonprofit organization, started raising money, uh, put together a whole board, hired a whole new staff. And so they had me back to be the inaugural speaker at the alumni weekend. And we did a fundraiser. And in 24 hours, we raised over $500,000.
Wow.
And I tell you that story to say I was
That's incredible.
inspired in part to be a lawyer by some of the amazing lay teachers as well as Catholic nuns that I had the opportunity to meet and experience while at this all girls high school. It's called Rosati Kane. Rosati Kane was a patron saint in the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
And the school sits in the heart of this amazing neighborhood. It's this historic building. And we know why the Archdiocese wants us out. They want it because this is like prime real estate, prime property, and they want to sell it. But
Yeah.
they thought we would go away as
Mhm.
alumni quietly. Little
Yeah.
did they know that we would rally together to save this school. And
That's
so
great.
I'm inspired because I've grown up around women like the alumni of this high school, women who don't take no for an answer, women who won't let obstacles deter them from their bigger mission, women who just lean in when difficult times occur and when there are difficult situations. And so, what we experienced as alumni over this alumni weekend, this sisterhood of women from all walks of life, and discovered that so many of the women who had graduated from this little tiny high school had gone on to do amazing things. Like the first African American judge in the state of Missouri is an alum of this school. The
That's
first
amazing.
African American judge to sit on the Missouri Supreme Court is an alumni of the school, and the list just goes on and on of amazing women. So I've always been fortunate to be surrounded by women like that, women who are so strong and resilient. So for me, going to law school, becoming a lawyer, and particularly a civil rights lawyer, is just continuing in a tradition that I was introduced to as a child and grew up in as an adolescent and a teen.
That's awesome. I love hearing that because, it's one thing to see you on CNN and what you're doing and go, oh, well, she's been this successful lawyer. But it's like, well, why? Why did you choose that as a career and not going to med school or going and becoming something other than an attorney? Um, Something really interesting that you said in our Bella Vita magazine issue is that you've really challenged the status quo, even just with the fashion choices and using that as self-expression. And I love you said fashion can change the world. And I love that idea. So I'd love for you to explain more about how you've used fashion to really challenge and really kick open doors for women, especially in the legal field, but in other walks of life as well.
Well, I consider myself, I've always been the underdog. I've always been the person that people were not expecting to do very much. And a part of that had to do with where I grew up, the side of the tracks that I grew up on, the zip code, where my family lived, the color of my skin, my gender. And so there weren't a lot of expectations placed on me. And people didn't expect very much. And so I feel like my whole life I've been defying norms, right? I've been defying expectations. I've been rising above the limits that society and people in, my circle have put on me. I told the story again. I go back to this high school alumni weekend because it was so powerful. And in the speech that I gave, I talked about having been told all my life as an adolescent that my choices were limited. I'm a graduate of the University of Chicago, a proud honors graduate with a degree in economics from one of the most rigorous academic institutions in the country, even above the Ivies. Even though I'm an Ivy School graduate as well. But I
Right.
remember talking to my counselors in high school about wanting to go to the University of Chicago and having them flat out tell me that that probably wasn't a good choice, that I probably couldn't cut it, that I was not the kind of material because I wasn't graduating valedictorian. I wasn't a straight A student all through high school. And quite frankly, had a counselor tell me I should basically consider junior college or what we call 2-year colleges or a state school. So when you have constantly been discounted and really marginalized, it's easy for me, I think, to take bold stands, to do things that defy what people expect of me, and fashion is one of those ways that I do that. When I was coming out of law school, I first summer jobs, and then my first job out of law school, I worked in a very, very conservative corporate law
Hmm.
environment where women wore navy blue and gray suits and crisp white and blue blouses. We looked like the mirror image of men who dressed from Brooks Brothers. We just had the skirt version of the same male suit. And
Right.
that was never who I was. That wasn't who that wasn't the way I wanted to express myself. That wasn't the way I wanted to dress. And so early on defied those norms. And I've always loved color. I've always loved fashion. My mother, ironically, had a stint as a fashion model.
Oh,
She
wow.
Sure, yeah. I'm 5'8". My mother was 5'10", 5'11",
Mm,
and she had a brief period. I mean, no big runway, no build, none of that. But she had a brief period because she was so tall, and she was
yeah.
flat gorgeous. She had these incredibly high cheekbones. And so someone saw her and said, you can do some print modeling work. And she did that for a couple of years. And we have these big, like, photos of her in her portfolio. But
Oh,
I grew up around women like my mother and different aunts and women in my village who all love dressing up. They love fashion. They love colorful fashion. And so that was very much who I was. And so I didn't see myself having a career where I had to suppress that part of my personality.
right. Right. Well, I love that. And, I was a financial advisor for a while, and the same rules apply. And they expected women to be in, the suits and skirts. And I'm like, yeah, that's not me. I'm not walking around in heels all day and, some Brooks Brothers. Although I had a few of those, I was like, yeah, I'd
I
rather
definitely went through my period of little pearl, little strand of pearls, with my
look I
pinstripe
fit
skirt,
in.
very, tailored hairstyle. And once I love long hair. I've had long hair all my life. But
Me
when I was working, I remember this was even before law school. I worked as an intern in the banking and finance industry. I worked for First Bank of Chicago, and I
too.
remember cutting my hair really short too, because also, there was a certain look with your hair if you were in corporate America. You couldn't have, long hair either. You had to be
Right.
pulled back into a bun or something very conservative. So I actually
Yeah.
cut my hair short for a summer as I worked in this bank, and I absolutely positively hated it
Mm,
because I've always had long hair and I've just always loved having long hair.
yeah. I can relate to that. I did that. I actually liked short hair, but I went through phases. I was like, "Ah, I'm sick of this, and I'm going to chop it off." And but I prefer my long hair now. Um, and also people who are watching who maybe don't know you or haven't followed you yet may not know that you also have a son with autism. I have a daughter with autism. And we had the pleasure of touring your facility in LA and going to your special flavors food truck. And I'm really excited that I get to go to your fundraiser, the Pink Pump affair. I keep calling it gala, but it's like a gala on May 19th at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills. You can still get tickets, I believe. Uh,
Yes.
I would love to hear more about what the mission behind Special Needs Network is and how you guys are really making a huge impact in children's lives and families' lives.
Well, as you said, my son Marty's on the autism spectrum. I have two other children, two daughters who are older than Marty. And when I learned that Marty had autism, my husband and I were absolutely devastated. And not devastated because, oh my God, something's wrong with Marty, but devastated because there was so little reliable, incredible information available for parents. I remember my husband, who's a lawyer too, we had so many questions for our developmental pediatrician, and she had so few answers. And it was frustrating as both of us as lawyers, we're used to scientific evidence. We're used to data. We're used to numbers. We're used to being able to see a problem, identify a solution. And it wasn't that way with autism. I mean, people didn't know a whole lot. And you had people on the internet telling their own personal stories,
Right.
some of which had no relevance to our lives. But people were encouraging us to follow this person and follow that person and try this diet and try this treatment plan, and it was very, very frustrating and overwhelming. And
Mhm.
I started the nonprofit after Marty, was a couple years old because I did not want other parents to go through what we went through. I mean, we had resources. We were self-employed. We could take time off work. I One day I remember trying to reach the superintendent of LA Unified School District over some issue, and literally sitting at my desk calling the superintendent for 8 hours until I got them to schedule a meeting for me to talk to someone, and recognizing that that's not reality for most people. Most people are on a job, they can't keep calling someone on the phone. So I just knew that there were parents out there that needed a lot more help than what we needed, and that they too were probably getting bombarded with a lot of fake news, a lot of disinformation. And so a part of starting Special Needs Network was to help those families, was to help clarify what was true and what was myth, and what was helpful and what was harmful. Because I saw people, quitting jobs and relocating or
Yeah.
spending thousands of hours on fake cures. And I didn't want families to have to go through that. So we started primarily just educating parents about what their legal rights were. I mean, that made the most sense for me as a lawyer. Like, let me just tell you what the law says, because
Yeah.
there's federal and state law that govern what services are available. So I started by just
Mhm.
holding workshops, educating families. I started by going to IEP meetings with families pro bono, going into different communities, teaching courses for families about IEPs, about how they could become advocates for their own kids. And this
Right.
started in a cubicle in my law firm with like my legal assistant as the single volunteer. And
And
you
you
know,
also have over 400 employees. I
I,
mean,
I
how
could not
many
have
locations?
imagined
5 locations?
5 offices, 5 locations. I
That's
could not
really
imagine. So there was another mom when we started the organization. She and I were together for about a year. And she had some personal challenges. She was going through a divorce, and she called me and she says, I gotta, I can't do this right now. My
Yeah.
son's on the spectrum. My daughter's having some issues. I'm going through a horrible divorce. I've got to rework my whole life financially, emotionally, etc. And I was faced with this dilemma. Like, do I just fold? That would have been the easy thing to do. I already was a lawyer. I already had my own law firm. I was busy. I already had 3 children. So it wasn't like I needed another job. But I remember calling home to St. Louis to speak to one of these aunts that, I grew up with. And we had a back to school event planned. Maybe it was 3 or 4 months off. We had already advertised it. So when this other parent tells me that she needed to step away, I'm telling my aunt, I can vividly remember I was driving down, in my car, and I'm talking to my aunt saying, wow, should I just
Yeah.
walk away? And my aunt says, well, I've never known you to quit anything. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, yeah, I'm really not a quitter. Like, she's like, you'll figure it out. Like, you will figure this out. And I didn't quit. I said, okay, let me roll up my sleeves. Let me put together, restructure the board to get people that I knew who I knew would support me. And I just kept going. And, you know, uh, here we are 15 years later,
I know.
with 5 offices, with, major funding, major grants, doing work across the state of California, and even influencing policy at the federal level. And I tell you, it wasn't the dream. I was just me and this other mom when we started together. We just were frustrated. We just wanted to help other parents. The first fundraiser we had was in my backyard. I I'm now a West Valley girl, which I said I would never be. But I
Yeah.
lived with my family in Hancock Park. I lived in Hancock Park for 25 years. Had the most beautiful 100-year-old Mediterranean house, and I had a huge backyard, swimming
Yeah.
pool, tennis court, and my first fundraiser. Literally, we tented my tennis court, and we had auction items. We had
That's
a really famous jazz guitarist because my friend who started with me was in the music business. And we had, I don't know, 100 of our closest friends come out and support us. And people were just so encouraging and supportive. And I
mhm.
thought about that event. I thought about what my aunt said. I, recognized that my friend needed to, deal with her family. So I wasn't
Yeah.
angry or grateful for what was going on with her. And
Mhm.
when I thought about it all, I said, you know what? I'll figure this out. And here we are. And we just figured it out. So,
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's very impressive, all the services you're providing. You have, you know, preschool services. You had a uh, STEM lab with NASA and the 3D printer. You had, oh my gosh, I was so impressed. All the
and
music
your husband had
show.
guitars. He
I
was happy
know, I
to see
know.
those
He lived
guitars.
closer, he would be there. He's like, "Oh gosh, it's kind of a drive, but it's beautiful."
Oh,
And we used to live close by to that location in Manhattan Beach. It would have been easy, but I didn't know you were there.
I
But
know. I live
I
myself an hour
know.
and a half away, so I know that LA traffic dilemma. Trust me.
Yeah, we we were working in downtown LA and commuting from Manhattan Beach to the US Bank Tower, and it was not fun. Um,
No.
but it's so incredible. And tell us a little bit more too. The Pink Pump Gala, it's its 16th or 15th
It's it's
anniversary.
May 19th. It's always the Sunday after Mother's Day. Because when we
Oh,
first
okay.
conceived of this event, we wanted it to be for mothers. We wanted to
Oh,
bring together women
that's great.
to raise money for a summer camp that we had started. We started a camp called Camp JPAC. It's the only fully integrated summer camp in Los Angeles. It's free, which is amazing. We have typical kids, and we have kids on the spectrum, kids with other disabilities. We have 3 to 1 adults in terms of both behaviorists as well as a huge number of camp counselors.
Huge.
And we thought about like what would bring women together? Like what do women want to do? There are a ton of galas. We live in LA. This is a gala city. There are like 1,200 a night, right? So add those to all of the big award shows.
Mm,
And we said, you know what? Women like tea. Women like fashion.
yeah.
Women like shoes.
Yep.
And another friend of mine who had a nonprofit, she did a hat gala and she did a hat auction. So they would have a fashion show and they would auction off these beautiful hats. So we're sitting around this table, we're saying, well, we can't do hats because Brenda, that's her friend. Brenda's already has this hat gala. So we're like throwing out all these ideas. What else do women love other than hats? And we're like, shoes, duh. It's called Pink Pump. And pink to symbolize that it was about the power of women, and pump because it was about a shoe, a pump, literally a pump.
Yeah.
And in the early days, it was a tea. It was literally a Sunday afternoon tea. Started out at what then was the Montage. They've since sold it, and I think there's a new name, but it's in Beverly Hills, and it was a lovely tea. And we had a fashion show because we needed the fashion show was really about the shoes. And we had a big donor at the time who was a shoe manufacturer. She had a line of shoes that she had in Nordstrom's, and she would always donate shoes. And our auction originally was a shoe auction. So that's pump evolved from a afternoon Sunday tea to now being, and it was always intimate. It's a little less intimate now. It's about 500 people come now, but it was meant to be women. You know, the Montage at the time, I think maybe it held 175 people with a fashion show. So it definitely has doubled in size, but it's still just an amazing event to see. You know, we have theme parties, right? So the theme is pink, and people shop days, months, weeks in advance. Like, what are you wearing to Pink Pump?
I am. I've been looking everywhere. Right.
What's your Pink Pump outfit? Everybody wants to know, like, what are you wearing for Pink Pump? And we've had some incredible women, and we started about 5 years ago honoring self-advocates. Jamie Foxx's sister, she's since deceased. She was she had Down syndrome. So she was one of the self-advocates that we honored at Pink Pump. We've honored other young women on the autism spectrum, others who've had other kinds of disabilities. So we make it a point to, in addition to honoring women and some men, this year we have a man, we've had men in the past, but look for those folks who are making significant contributions to their communities, to their society, or to our society. And we have a fashion show because we love fashion. We have our auction is going to blow your mind. I can't really even describe it to you. It's something the likes of which people have never seen. And our auction evolved over time. You know, auctions at these kinds of events sometimes get really tired. They get really boring. People don't really want to bid. So about 4 or 5 years ago, right before COVID, or I get confused with COVID, but because we did a couple online during COVID, but we reimagined our auction and we came up with the funnest way to host an auction that you have ever seen. So I'm not going to tell you because I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to give the spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
It's a really fun way to auction off and to raise money for summer camp. And then we have a live auction. We have one of our board members is a award-winning actress and comedian, Kim Whitley. She's hilarious. So for the first time last year in about 8 years, she wasn't there because she was out on the road touring, and we really, really missed her. We thought we'd get this really hunky guy to take her place. He was a gorgeous, handsome man, but we still missed our Kim. Kim is just, she owns this live auction. So Pat Harvey from CBS has been our MC. Pat has a sister who's had developmental challenges, and so this is a community that's very close to her. She's been a caregiver for her sister. So a lot of folks involved have a direct connection. You know, they're there for the cause, but they're there because they may have a child on the spectrum, or they may have a relative or someone that has been impacted by autism.